Good day to all of you. My name is Chan. I'm very happy to be here today. Thank you for organizing such a wonderful conference. Allow me to present to you the title of the paper today is a qualitative evaluation of narrative effectiveness used in the sixth and Titanic films, a forgotten minority perspective. I'm the presenter, and together with me are Han Jingwei, Ghislaine Lewis, Wong Chi Ho, Tan Seng Teck, and Gianluca Wagner-Reilly. Well, just a brief introduction. Many of us would have heard about Titanic film, one of the highest grossing film of all time. And very few of us would have heard about the sixth film documentary. So the sixth film documentary features about a minority group that survived on board the Titanic. And here we are to find out the research objective is to analyze the similarities and differences between the two films, to discover what the sixth documentary reveals, to find out what the impact of historical truth on Chinese minorities. So in the literature review, very few literature would discuss on social discrimination and films together. All in all, in the Scopus references, we have about 16, out of which two are very closely related. So social discrimination, another name is social stigma, sometimes and more often than not discourage people from openly discussing the topic. Well, it can be a race, it can be gender, it can be accessibility. Now, other forms of inequality that prevent people from talking because it's shame, is very scared to talk about it. And of course, in terms of racial disparity, we talk about the differences in terms of social and economics, in terms of safety, merits, other aspects of life and lifestyle. Well, the significance of this research study, it taps into the widespread interest of Titanic on historical truth, highlighting the sixth documentary, the long history of anti-Asian sentiment. And it talks about social discrimination, racial disparity, film and documentary, narrative paradigm, so on and so forth. Well, in a nutshell, the central thing that we use are the narrative paradigm, which is different from rational world paradigm. Narrative paradigm talks about humans are essentially storytellers. I'm sure we do because we create a lot of content on social media. TikTok is always one of them, and Instagram. And human makes decision based on reasonable reasons, depending on communication situation, media, and genre. It's also based on historical, biography, culture, so on and so forth. Now, in a nutshell, let's have a look at the methodology. The research design uses qualitative methodology, and we use interview protocol before, during, and after, and we use fully structured interview question to avoid putting our personal opinions in it. The sampling that we use is snowball sampling because we look from one to another, those who have watched the film. And we use validation through triangulation method whereby researchers from different backgrounds coming together to deliberate on how we can go about on analyzing these two films. Well, a little bit brief background of the respondent. We have total 10 interview respondent, and they come from different various occupation. But I must say that most of them are very young age, between 22 to 24. Let's go to the finding and analysis. Well, in answering first research objective one, the similarities and difference between the Titanic and the sixth film, now most of them were able to differentiate between the two films. This in the sixth, for example, most of them after watching they feel that there is an understanding of the subject matter. They were able to identify themselves, understand and paying attention to what actually happened to the sixth survivor. Compare with Titanic, it is more on the fictional base and character base. Now, even one of the respondents was mentioned is Anglo-American. Most focuses the Titanic movie focuses on white, whereas majority of them that on board Titanic. Now, in research objective 2, to discover what the sixth documentary revealed, now we found that there was a number of repeated words being used. In particular, discrimination, repeated 11 times. Migrants are those who are being there for a purpose, a short time. Immigrants who are there for a longer time, and being repeated 9 times. And other topics like ethnic exclusion and racial. Well, it reveals from this finding that unfair treatment they suffered. It highlights the widespread of racial discrimination, surprisingly, in United States in the earlier 20th century, and highlight the impacts of the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, depicting the challenges and hardship experienced by the Chinese immigrants in their quest for better life. Now, this is so true that many of them, after watching, they say this is a form of inequality. Right, in answering research objective third, what to find out the impact of the historical truth on the Chinese minority, they find that most respondents answered positively, whereby we found that 71 repeated positive words were mentioned by 10 interviewees, compared with the negative words of 18 repeated negative words. So we can see after watching documentary, it gives them a sense of a positivity, a sense of accomplishment. And for example, they talk about experience, survivors, understanding, compared with the negative words with disaster, differences, suffering. Those were very few mentioned. Well, in conclusions, it features a minority perspective and cannot be equated to a majority. And we also understand that discrimination has long been traced back a long time and it still happens today. We have not learned our lesson well by looking at what's happening around us. There's war, there's refugees, there's immigrants, as well as migrants. Well, what we would like to suggest for this future research is that future research can replicate by using this method, watching films to educate and encourage marginalized communities to speak up. That's all for my presentation. Thank you for watching. Are there any questions from the floor?